Santa School. By Melinda Curtis. Copyright 2018 by Melinda Curtis. Chapter 1. Ruby Caldwell's father used to have a saying for every facet of life, every disappointment, every triumph. It wasn't one of Dad's sayings that sprang to mind this morning, the Monday after Thanksgiving. "Come again," Ruby said to Art, her boss at Christmas County Memorial Hospital where she worked as a healthcare concierge. "I'm afraid your position is being eliminated as of January 1st, Art repeated, his bald head and slim shoulders silhouetted against the snow-covered parking lot outside his first-floor window. Ruby's veins iced over and for a moment she forgot to breathe as the term Black Monday took on new meaning. "But I still have a job, right?" The hospital was very large and employed hundreds of people. "In another department?" After all, she'd just gotten a stellar review. She held it in a hand that trembled. Art's gaze drifted to a thick manila envelope on his desk with Ruby's name typed on a label. "Actually, there's nothing available at the moment that fits your qualifications." He handed Ruby the envelope and gave her a smile that was so uncomfortable she could only return it in kind. "And starting today, we're cutting your hours back to part-time, mornings only." Ruby stumbled out of Art's office into a crowded, garland-strung hallway between the hospital's main lobby and the cafeteria. She sagged against a wall next to a drooping loop of sparkly garland, hugging her termination papers to her chest. "Every black cloud comes with a silver lining, Ruby dear." That was Dad's voice in her head, as gruff and optimistic as if he stood next to Ruby, as if he was still alive and didn't have a permanent view of Christmas Valley from the town cemetery. As a healthcare concierge, Ruby had helped match patients with available services and financial resources. She loved interacting with people, easing their minds, helping them find their way in the healthcare labyrinth with a positive attitude and a smile. A smile had gotten her through tough times as a kid. But now, "Where's my silver lining, Dad?" Stanley, the janitor, pushed his cart past Ruby, pausing to tack up the loose garland loop. "Thanks again, Miss Caldwell." That sounded like goodbye. Had the news of her firing spread already? Ruby clutched her employee badge and wished she could press a finger to the side of her nose and vanish, like Santa Claus. "I'm booked through the 24th, Stanley continued, giving her a thumbs up. "Santa School is going to give my kids a wonderful holiday this year." Santa School. There's my silver lining. In addition to working full-time, 3 years ago Ruby started Holiday Cheer with the goal of filling the gaps in holiday service industry. Her first offering was Santa School, which trained men and women for jobs as seasonal Santas. Fresh off a weekend where the jolly old elves from her program had made successful debuts in the Christmas Town Thanksgiving Parade, on Santa's throne in the town square, and at various businesses downtown, she supposed this was her silver lining. Holiday Cheer was profitable 4 months of the year. Unfortunately, it was a highly seasonal business, even in Christmas Town where Christmas was celebrated year-round. It had a zero balance in the other months and she struggled to pay her office rent. Every problem, like a frown, has a flip side, Ruby dear. Ruby had wanted to expand her business. She just hadn't been able to envision how to do it, or perhaps she hadn't had the energy to devote to planning while she was working full-time. Until this year. This year, she'd added a 3-week class aimed at Christmas-challenged dads, planning show them how easy it was to embrace and execute the holiday. She dubbed her new program Elf School. So what if she'd been downsized? This was a sign. It was time to make her dream of running her own business a reality. With renewed hope, Ruby detached herself from the wall and headed toward her desk. She'd start this afternoon. Sign-ups for Elf School were slim. Perhaps because she hadn't put enough flyers around town. Hope spread. A smile filled Ruby's face. Her steps rang with purpose. "You were fired?" Norma Caldwell quit slathering Ruby's turkey sandwich with cranberry sauce and blinked at her with heavily lined eyes. "Well, isn't that just one more sign that the holidays suck?" "Mom, keep your voice down." Ruby glanced around the Three Elves sandwich shop, but the hard rock Christmas carols being piped in covered her mother's shock. "And I was downsized, not fired." "You can say downsized all you want, but come January 1, you'll be fired." Her mother finished applying cranberry sauce and pressed a slice of wheat bread on top, squeezing out excess cranberry and cream cheese. "I suppose you'll be moving back in with me." Only as a last resort, Ruby muttered under her breath. Much as she loved her mother, she saw only dark clouds, no silver linings. "I have Holiday Cheer. And now I can devote myself to it full-time." "That hobby?" Mom placed Ruby's sandwich onto a paper-lined, plastic basket, and then added a pickle and a small bag of chips. "You think you have trouble making ends meet now living in that trailer park? Hobbies don't pay the heating bill." Her mother stopped talking and gripped the basket on her side of the sandwich counter, staring at Ruby's food in horror. Oh, no. I shouldn't have sold you this sandwich. You should be eating bologna at home. Mom. Mom. Ruby waved a hand. I'll be okay. That's your father talking. Mom placed Ruby's sandwich on the glass countertop between them and went to help the next customer in line. You can't fix this by adding more tinsel to your tree. But I'm going to try. Ruby took her sandwich and retreated to a booth in the back, thinking about her father and the early Christmases he'd made feel special. She'd heard her married friends joke that their husbands could barely shop at the holidays, much less help decorate. Elf school was going to give men like that the confidence and joy they needed to surprise and delight their families. With a lull in sandwich making, her mother began wiping down tables, moving quickly to the beat of Rob Halford's heavy metal version of We Three Kings. The Three Elves sandwich shop never played traditional Christmas carols when Mom was working. After her divorce, Ruby's mother had reinvented herself around a theme of black wardrobe, black hair, black eye makeup, and played headbanging music like the rebellious anthem of a teenager. Where did my cookie-baking, Christmas-loving mother go? Ruby asked, only half joking. She died in the divorce. That was her mother's pat answer, which was almost always followed by, and that's all you need to know about that. Because heaven forbid her parents acknowledge Ruby was older than 30 and able to understand the reason their marriage fell apart. In Ruby's book, Secrets Sucked, which might have been hypocritical considering she lived in a town that perpetuated the myth and magic of Christmas. After she'd eaten her comfort food, Ruby swung by the Holiday Cheer office on Joyful Street to pick up more flyers for elf school. She opened the door and was several feet inside before she realized there was a man about 6 feet tall in the room. He was standing in front of Santa's throne on the small stage and was wearing a red coat. But he wasn't Santa. Ruby screamed, grabbed the metal stapler from the front desk and took aim, heart pounding in her chest. The intruder straightened and let his yellow metal tape measure slide back into its box. He grimaced. Wow, you're loud. Not exactly the reaction she'd expected from a man who was breaking and entering. Ruby stopped screaming and danced on the balls of her feet like a wrestler preparing to engage, cocking her throwing arm. What are you doing here? How did you get in? If you took anything, you've got the wrong idea. The trespasser held his hands up next to his very handsome face in a gesture of surrender. Truly, burglars shouldn't have refined features like his. Or good hair. His was a crisply cut brown that was a shade lighter than his eyes. He had on scuffed work boots, the kind that looked slightly oversized because they had reinforced steel toes, and dark blue work pants with a light blue work shirt. You're trespassing, bub. And my idea is to call the cops. With her free hand, Ruby dug into her jacket pocket for her cell phone, never taking her eyes off him. Like that was a hardship. The man was knock-me-out handsome with his 5 o'clock shadow and the kind of face you just knew could toss a sexy smile at a woman before his first cup of coffee. Your landlord gave me the key. The attractive burglar reached into his pants pocket for a small key ring. I didn't break in. I'm here to service your heater. Ruby's heart stopped feeling as if it was chipping its way out of her chest. It had been nippy in her offices last week as she'd helped her team of Santas with their last-minute preparations for Thanksgiving weekend. Ruby lowered the stapler and then thought better of it, raising it again. Why were you measuring? His gaze slid over his shoulder toward the raised stage and Santa's throne. Tell me the truth. I'll know if you're lying. Ruby scowled. She sounded like she had magical powers of perception. She didn't. The intruder sighed and confessed. The Tarlingtons offered me a lease on this space for the new year. But, the stapler slipped through Ruby's fingers and clattered to the worn green linoleum. This is my space. My livelihood. My life. Your rented space, he said not unkindly. And your lease is running out at the end of the year. It was. It had been on Ruby's to-do list to request a new lease from her landlords, but she'd put it off, fearing a lecture about late payments, or worse, a rent increase. You're not a burglar, Ruby said dejectedly, because what he was so much worse. The man shook his head, approaching her cautiously. I'm Dominick Decker. Ruby recognized the name. He'd moved to Christmas Town last summer with his daughter and had purchased Jack Frost Heating and Air. He was the son-in-law of her landlords. Or he had been when their daughter Mia was alive. In fact, they'd met before. Ruby had given the man her condolences at Mia's funeral last January while he'd held the hand of a little girl with Mia's sunny blonde hair. Jack Frost Heating and Air is over on Garland Lane, Ruby said. By North Pole Lumber. Why do you need an office here? On the opposite end of town. Dom's expression grew wary. I have other business interests. And from his tone, she gathered it was none of her business what they were. For the second time that day, Ruby felt small and insignificant. It's a legitimate business. Dom nodded toward Santa's throne, a judgmental smile on his perfectly formed lips. I hear you trained Santas here. Anger surged. Don't tell me you're one of those. You shouldn't have moved here if you don't wholeheartedly believe in, and love, Christmas. He smirked. Christmas is commercialized. It's just another day of work for me. Let the little stuff go. Be like the pine and bend to the storm. Her father's words might have worked yesterday. But today, Ruby's world was falling apart. She was inches short of being the pine tree the storm blew over last week in Reindeer Meadow. She had to dig in and hang on. Ruby picked up the stapler and slammed it on the desktop. Tell me, bub, what special holiday traditions are you passing on to your daughter? His gaze hardened, brown eyes darkening to the shade of cool, polished walnut. Let me translate your silence. She waved her hand in the air between them as if she was painting a big squiggle down his chest. You have no traditions to pass on and no way to make the holiday special since you'll be working that day, charging extra to unlucky families without heat and laughing all the way to the bank. Dom crossed his arms over his chest and lowered his chin, not backing off. And how would training to be a department store Santa solve my holiday problems? It wouldn't. This man shouldn't be living in Christmas Town, much less donning a red suit. But attending my elf school, for the holiday challenged. Will. Elf school. He smirked again. I tell you what. Ruby snatched a flyer from her desk. If you attend elf school over the next few weeks and you don't learn to love the holiday, I'll vacate the premises without a fight. She shoved the paper into his chest, tamping down the panicked voice in her head that was advising against this course of action. But if you get bit by the holiday spirit, this space is mine. If she could only do one thing this holiday season, let it be to force-feed this man some holiday cheer. He took the sheet of bright green paper and scanned it. Elf school? What man in his right mind would come to something called elf school? The name. Ruby's ears rang with panicked truth. This was why enrollment was nearly non-existent. She had to change the program's name. Dom continued scanning the flyer. So, you're Ruby Caldwell, Chief Executive of Holiday Cheer? He paused, his smirk softening into a sad smile that tried to tug at her heartstrings. I know you. You were one of Mia's childhood friends. And later, one of her teenage frenemies, but Ruby shrugged. So? You know the Tarlingtons well. That she did. Before her parents had divorced, they'd lived across the street from the Tarlingtons. Mia had been Ruby's BFF. I'll do you one better, Dom said, a sorrowful challenge in those dark brown eyes. If your course delivers as promised, you can stay here, and I'll pay your lease next year. Ruby couldn't get her hand out to shake on it fast enough. I'll see you on the first Tuesday in December. Their palms connected with a jolt. Ruby yanked her hand back. Dom Decker was electric. That spark charged up her arm and said, shall we dance? It skittered into her chest and said, not just once. And then it exploded into her head and said, for the rest of your life. She stumbled into the door behind her, recovering enough to open it and wheeze, goodbye. With one last look at her, Dom walked out the door. Ruby closed it behind him, wondering what she'd gotten herself into.